Hey, good morning. Robert Phoenix here with another edition, excuse me, of the 15 minutes of flame, or rather 15 minutes of flame, just like it's not the Facebook, but Facebook. What's happening out there? We are 2 days out of the Manchester event, and I'm going to talk about that to a large extent today. And so let me just jump into it with as little preamble as possible. What I will attempt to do is I will attempt to at least set the emotional stage under which the event hit me on the 22nd and the pursuant morning, which was yesterday. Essentially, I was going through my own kind of emotional trauma, and I wouldn't call it trauma, but I've been going through some pretty intense stuff on the emotional side, and I think a lot of the planet is actually going through a lot of intense energy on the emotional side. I this season of the Venus being retrograde, and starting off in Taurus and retrograding back into Aries, and then moving forward in Aries has been very intense in a lot of ways, and more so, I think, once Venus went direct, because it almost felt as if there was this kind of backlog of intensity and emotion and relating, and once Venus went forward in Aries, the floodgate kind of opened up. And clearly, I've had a few incidents in my life where I've been a witness to it, and to some degree even a participant. There's a lot of intensity in the air, and people are going through it. And that's kind of on the micro scale. On the macro scale, of course, there are a lot of other things going on. The one event that really grabs our attention, of course, is the Trump Fertile Crescent, the Abrahamic World Tour, which I'll also talk about today. I was watching the footage of Trump early this morning, when he was being welcomed by the Vatican Guard and ultimately the Pope. Wow. This whole thing is just, extremely surreal. This is utterly, utterly surreal. And of course, there's Jared Kushner, the omnipresent. He's always there. He's lurking right there by his side. And Ivanka, of course, and Melania wearing black throughout most of this tour, which is, are they in mourning? Did I miss something here? Is it the death of America? Is it the death of freedom? Is that what they're mourning? Because every time I see them, they're wearing black. I was wondering how Jared Kushner felt. An observant, a member of the observant sect of Judaism, strolling through the Vatican. I wonder how he felt. Did he feel uncomfortable? Probably not, since the Vatican's been infiltrated. It's just another palace of occult powers. Anyway, the Pope didn't spend a lot of time with Jared. Trump introduced him. This is Jared. I heard it. This is Jared. The Pope didn't even look at him. I guess he was even a bit too evil for the Pope. That's another story. So we are going through some emotional intensity right now, and it is not going to abate. It's just not going to abate, and we're going to just have to get through these emotional shitstorms to the best of our ability and retain our dignity and character as much as we can along the way. And I'm telling you, this is a time where people are suffering. And there's some very deep discord of the spirit taking place, and I've seen it and experienced it. And of course, it's not out there in the open per se. It's a very private experience for a number of people, but it's an undercurrent. It's a deep undercurrent that is very much part of our time. So I spent most of the morning writing and trying to drill down on this Manchester event, and some of the pieces that I've been able to just experience over the last 24 hours are we're in a weird place with these events now. Okay, very, very strange, because they feel like they're false. There's just this kind of this energy. It's like, here we go again. Another false flag. Another attempt to corral us and move us into a pen of sorts. And there are some compelling videos out there. Like, of course, they had a terror drill, a rehearsal on May 10th in Manchester. It happened on the 22nd of May, which is the anniversary of the event where they had Lee, what's his name, with the knife, and the Woolwich thing, which was a complete false flag. Lee Rigby. That happened on the 22nd of May. So there are all these signs, signifiers, ciphers that correspond with the event. If you go onto YouTube, you'll see a number of videos, and one of the videos you want to find and search out is the voice of the guy who is talking about leaving the auditorium. Very calm. Please leave the auditorium. Nothing's happening. Blah 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 blah. Now, you would think that in the event of a crisis, that's the kind of voice you would get. I don't think you would get, get the hell out of here! The place is gonna blow! I mean, you're gonna get the calm voice. So I don't necessarily diss the calm voice, but it's the voice that's interesting. It's an American voice. And it clearly sounds like it emanates from the East Coast. New York, New Jersey, maybe Maryland. Interesting. Very interesting voice. It's not an English voice. So is it an American working in Manchester? Maybe. Maybe. But it's one of these anomalies that obviously will pop up as a result of a lot of different strange pieces of reality and surreality all colliding together. There is an interesting video that is making the rounds on YouTube. The author of the video is Lift the Veil, and he's making a connection between two young women, Georgina Calendar and another young woman who was supposedly at the concert looking very much alike. So Georgina Calendar, 18 years old, is supposedly one of the victims of the bomb blast, the terror blast. And there's a young woman on Good Morning America. She's talking with Robin Roberts, and she looks just like this Georgina Calendar girl, with a much heavier kind of application of eyebrow, wearing the same braces. Now you go and scroll through that video, and it's the reaction to it is pretty intense. I mean, there are people like, F you, you cunt, and on and on and on. I knew Georgina. This is not Georgina. Da 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 da. I mean, there's this maelstrom and this backlash. Like, there are 872 likes and 592 dislikes on this video. So it's, probably about 60-40. And there are other videos where there are other pieces of information and details that don't match up. Okay, so let's say, for the sake of argument, that it may be a false flag, it may not be a false flag, maybe it's a hybrid event, and they have hybrid events. It's still, and this is what other people who are kind of on the tip of this, it still moves us towards an agenda. It still moves us towards an agenda. What is the agenda? That's the question. What is the agenda? The agenda, in my mind, is the Gazification of the planet. That is the agenda, where biometrics, checkpoints, all sorts of personal identification gates are set up all across the planet. This is where all of this is leading us. If you look at what the people of Palestine, Gaza, have to go through with their various checkpoints and everything that slows their life down to a crawl, you'll see that this is the model of the planet. It's a model of absolute and utter control. Now, that said, what would be the remedy for something like that? Well, let's just say that these events, which are happening now at a more frequent rate, let's just say they wind up as part of a new bill that's sponsored by fill in the blank. And it's a new version of the Patriot Act or some augmented version of the Patriot Act, and all of a sudden there are new safeguards that essentially impinge upon our personal freedoms and the right and the ability to travel and move. We already have some of that in effect at times. But what if it is mandated that you will have to go through certain areas at certain times or all times and have to produce some form of identification in order to get through that particular checkpoint area, zone, gateway, whatever. And what if the alternative was that you didn't have to produce any kind of ID, but there was another lane set up for essentially biometric transport, so that you had agreed to have a retinal scan of your eyes and all the other things that go along with it, and you just shoot off in this lane, and there's a camera, and they're able to do this. There's a camera that's able to essentially capture your retinal scan in real time. Now, what would be what would happen if you just ran through that? Well, they essentially come get you after the fact and throw your ass in jail, right? I mean, that could happen. I'm just putting out a future scenario here because the whole biometric thing is going to explode. It's going to be big. And Trump even talked about this when he was running for president. He said, we need more security, we need more information, we need better information. That's code for surveillance and biometrics. And trust me, there are companies, and I talked about this about a month and a half ago, and I just read off that list of companies that are ready to rock and roll with the biometric solution, whether it's airports, shopping centers, stadiums. It's coming. And this is part of it. This is part of it. That's part of the agenda, is essentially the Gazification of the world. Well, there's another part of the agenda, and the other part of the agenda is putting Iran in the crosshairs. Because, of course, ISIS says, oh yeah, we did that. One of our dudes. But really, was it? There's some pushback on that. And we all know, well, we, being the people that listen to this show, know that ISIS is a creation. It was created. Just like Al-Qaeda, just like the Taliban, all created. Somebody's listening to the show right now. They sent me an interesting tweet. Listening, yesterday I saw 5 to 10 things on my Twitter feed about biometric security. I wasn't following anything, and it didn't say sponsored. Yeah, I'm telling you. I am telling you. We are being prepped for the next stage and the next evolution of security, and it's biometrics. And this is what this is about. The other piece is the crosshairs with Iran, because they want to be able to filter fake ISIS, the former Taliban. Well, ISIS is not former Taliban, but we've seen this for years. For years. Go back to Lawrence of Arabia and the British, right? In Turkey. in what Lawrence of Arabia was there to do, which was basically create a counter coup. So this has been happening for years. How do you think they got Mossadegh out in Iran? They created a coup. How do you think they got the Shah out? They created a coup. And so who did they bring in? They brought in the Ayatollah. And they essentially put in a theocracy in Iran. Yeah, we did that because we didn't like the Shah. The Shah got it in his head that he thought that he was really the ruler of Iran. How arrogant. He brought prosperity, he brought equality, he brought amazing cultural events, the Festival of Persepolis. He look, is any president or dictator or great guy? No, they're not. I believe the Iranian intelligence services, or the Savak, is that what they were called? Pretty intense. Pretty intense going after people that want to stir up shit and have a different model. If you're look, I understand the mind of a president or a dictator because people always want to, they want to. There's a level of disturbance and rebellion and revolution and upsetting the apple cart. Once you ascend to the throne, you're always looking over your shoulder. Always. Where's the plot? Who's out to get me? Where are the conspirators? Because that's just the way it is on planet Earth. Even the greatest, most beloved leaders on the planet, if there ever were some, and I think there may have been a few. We only have 30 minutes. I'm not going to go through the list. But, even they had to look over their shoulder. And what do you do? I mean, really, we've kind of ascended to this level of spiritual evolution where everything should be really kind of cool and loving and open and unified. And I get that, I get that. But if you're running one of these countries, theoretically, and probably more so like in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, but now everything is pretty much been New World Order-fied. But if you're running one of these countries and you've got somebody coming in and wants to basically take your shit, what are you going to do? You're going to make an example of them. And that's just the way it is. Why? Because once people see the example, they're going to, well, I shouldn't probably do that. I got a wife, I got kids, I have testicles, I want to keep them. Right? I mean, that's what happens. That's the real world. That is the real world. And it's funny because when it does happen, and it's really in the service of trying to just, maintain some order and a semblance of continuity, then you have people screaming against human rights abuses and, so it can be weaponized too. It's a very interesting kind of phenomena that we have here on planet Earth. I don't necessarily support it, but I understand it. So what we have with the Manchester event now is this Iran's in the crosshairs. And remember, we put the government there. They're going to try to relocate ISIS, which was created, another advent of the security state, the deep state, U.S., Turkey, Israel. They got their fingerprints all over ISIS, Saudi Arabia, all over ISIS. And they're going to try to relocate ISIS to Iran and trace ISIS to Iran, and that Iran is the nest of ISIS. That's the other piece that's going to go on here. So we have the biometric piece, we have the herding piece, and we have the potential to take out Iran based on a series of events. And just watch over the course of the next month to 2 months, and how there will be more events. Trust me, this is not going to abate. We're going to have more of these, whether they're real or false, whatever they are, they're not going to abate. And with each event that occurs, they're going to try to curve it back to Iran. They're going to try to curve everything back to Iran so that the evidence will be on the table. And there may even be something here in this country that they'll somehow be able to pin on Iran, and that'll be That'll be the green light. Once the Saudis get a lot of these weapons that the United States are going to sell to them, they may say, hey, go after these guys, Saudi Arabia. We've armed you up. We got your back, which would be, very interesting. And maybe a 5D chess move. Trump would be an evil bastard, wouldn't he? If he was doing all of this basically to get Israel and Saudi Arabia to go to war against Iran, and then Iran wipes them out. That would be the evil bastard move. Am I right? I don't think that that's what it's about, but we can postulate that. Because if I were playing 5D chess, that's what I would do. I'd say, hey, here, take all these weapons. Yeah, sure, but you got to use them against Saudi Arabia. And by the way, why don't you team up with Israel? And you guys can take, you got to use them against Iran. By the way, team up with Israel, and that way you guys can, be a united force here in the Middle East, and then just have Iran and Russia wipe them off the map. Hey, it's an interesting idea, interesting plan. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but what do you think Saudi Arabia is going to do with all the weapons? Well, first they'll probably go after Yemen, which is a whole other thing, and we're not going to get into that today because we only have theoretically 5 minutes left. So what else is some of the fallout from this Manchester event? And I'm putting together a piece. I'm almost done. I'm looking at the chart. There's some interesting things going on with the chart for that night. But I'm putting together a piece. I'm going to put it up on the website. I've been working on it all morning. Last night I was listening to a talk show host. And he's a syndicated talk show host here in Texas. He's based out of Houston or San Antonio. I think he's based out of Houston, but he's on a broadcast out of a San Antonio station, WOAI, 100,000 watts. I used to listen to WOAI in California back in the 90s, pre-internet. Back in the days when we had AM radio, and we listened to AM radio at night. And you try to get that signal, that faraway signal. So what I would do, because at that time I couldn't get Art Bell in California. And I was very into Art Bell at the time. Couldn't get him. So I had to get a signal from another, part of the country. And I could get WOAI for the most part in California at night, emanating from San Antonio. Anyway, this guy Mike Berry's on, and I'm listening to him. And it was like I wanted to turn the dial off. Because what he was talking about was utter bullshit. But I forced myself to listen. Like, what is this guy doing? Where is he going? It was almost as if he was reading off of a script. Because it is the party line now, right? This is the party line that ISIS did this, and ISIS is evil. They've got more assets than almost any other country on the planet. They own the oil fields and so on and so on and so on. Should we send a missile into ISIS? Because really, at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to, And it was the guy's pretty articulate. He's a Scorpio. I looked up his sign. He's pretty articulate, and it's clear he's got a pretty big following. He's one of the top 100 talkers in America. But what he was talking about was he's just talking shit, to be honest with you, because what he was doing was he was psychologically manipulating people. I mean, this guy is a cheerleader for the right, and not the good version of the right. We're talking post 9/11, you're either with us or against us version of George Bush's right. Not the free-thinking, paleo-conservative, libertarian, alt version of the right. No. This is the party line right. And he's one of these guys that's kind of modeled as a bit of a maverick, makes people think about things in different ways. Bullshit. He's a manipulator. Sorry. Free speech. Anyway, that's just one guy. And he's syndicated, right? He's syndicated all over the country. And so what he's doing is he's running a program post-Manchester, post-trauma. And he's not alone. I mean, I was listening to, I don't listen to him very often. I was listening to Sean Hannity. Same deal. So they're running the script, right? As if this thing is real. And it could be real. There could be elements that are real. We're trying to untangle the knots. What happens now is that there is such a high level of volatility that if you try to go in and, like say the Seth Rich stuff, right? You try to go into the Seth Rich material. I got a guy that listens who he lives here in Austin, Perry Logan. I love Perry. He's great. He's a genius. And I've had him on my show. I think he sells a cable access show. I don't know. I don't get cable access anymore. But anyway, Perry is just like fake news. Seth Rich is fake news because Perry's on the left. And it's fine. He's kind of a thinking liberal for the most part. But, people are, they pile on now. Oh, how could you do this? You should go to hell, you scumbag. I mean, this is the kind of language that's being stirred up. And it's a very interesting sort of phenomenon because what it does theoretically is you have, people playing the role of big brother, their little brother, and they're quote unquote policing our thoughts, policing our ability to, crack things open. And sometimes it will get messy. Sometimes we'll go down the wrong path. Sometimes, we'll make a wrong assessment. Is life perfect? Are the investigators and the coroners of the planet, are they perfect? Hell no. Is mainstream news perfect? Hell no. What did mainstream news do to Richard Jewell? It ruined his life. Mainstream news as an adjunct of the security state ruined Richard Jewell's life. Richard Jewell being the guy who uncovered the bomb in Atlanta and basically saved lives. They ruined him. Now, Richard Jewell made some money off of it. He was slandered. But his life was ruined, tarnished, dragged through the mud. You see, it happens all the time. And is there ever a major retraction, a major mea culpa? The answer is no. So pardon us if in our own rush to untangle the knots and get to the truth, because the agencies that are supposed to represent us don't, or have failed us repeatedly, or stalled, or waylaid any kind of real investigation like 9/11, forgive us if we make mistakes. Forgive us if at the times we jump the gun. Should we be sensitive? Of course. Because, number one, we don't want to get caught with our pants down. You get caught with your pants down, it's embarrassing, and it delegitimizes the effort. I think Alex Jones might have learned that. And and we have to be kind of really vigilant and discerning when it comes to this. And sensitive too. So there should be caveats. But it should not deter us. The voices of contempt and quite possibly manufactured contempt should not deter us from at least the effort to understand and untangle what's going on. Now, of course, we're not talking about Seth Rich as much, are we? No, we're not. Why? Well, we're talking about Manchester. We're talking about what happens and what we need to do, how we can prevent it. Who are these people? How can we eliminate them? Look, this is an extortion racket. That's exactly what it is. Terrorism is an extortion racket of the highest order. And what are they extorting? They're extorting your freedom. They're extorting your joy. They're extorting your peace of mind. And it is the greatest crime against humanity. That's my take. I'm sorry I'm feeling a little impassioned today. Man, I'm not sorry for it. It is what it is. So again, as it relates to Manchester, I don't really know if it was a false flag or not. It could have elements of a false flag. Certainly there are things that are there that resemble the markings of a false flag. And we can put them together and piece them together, but we have to be careful. And I'm just saying we have to be careful. We don't want to get caught in a honey trap. I will say this though, and I'm trying to make a case for this with this piece that I'm writing, is that every time Donald Trump has made some kind of a public statement about terror or crime, there's been an event that's happened shortly thereafter. And it all started with the Kate Shanley, I'm sorry, event in San Francisco. And I was very dubious about that. I was like, wow, this is kind of wild. I mean, Trump is either prophetic or they're running an event here so he can capitalize on it. Because he was talking about criminals and murderers and rapists that cross the border, and yeah, there are undesirables that come into the country. That's for sure. And there are undesirables that are in this country, and that's a given too. But he was able to capitalize on the fact that Kate, is it Steinle? I think it's Kate Steinle. Yeah, it's Kate Steinle. That's what it is. That Kate Steinle was, killed by this guy who's in a sanctuary city and had a record and blah, 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 blah. But when you look at that, if you really, really, really look at that event, there's so many strange pieces that are just unanswered around that event. And apparently Kate Steinle's brother was a crisis actor in another event in, I think it was Virginia. So it's like, isn't that interesting? Every time Trump would go on the offensive with the radical Islam piece, there would seem to be an event that would corroborate his rhetoric. Oh yes, we gotta do this. And the same thing happened. He was in Israel, and he was talking about this evil, this terror, and he was going on and on and on about it. And just a few hours later, we have this thing happen in Manchester. It's like, oh, he's right. Is he prophetic? Is he a time traveler? Or is he in on a larger series of events that he's a co-conspirator in? I'm just throwing it out there. Because if you look at it, and I'm going to try to create a timeline, the timing is rather suspicious with all of these things. And I still think it was great that he busted down the politically correct rhetoric and broke through that mindset for a lot of people. But we got to be on our toes now, and we have to be nimble. Nimble. It is the month of Gemini, isn't it? Trump's powers are soon to ascend to their glorious height as he gets to experience his solar return shortly at 22 degrees Gemini. That'll be interesting, no doubt. All right, this is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. We'll be back tomorrow, 24 hours from now. And I'll also have Darren Williams on Friday. And we'll be talking about what happened in Manchester and what his take is from that part of the world. So you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to open what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you guys tomorrow.